Over 90 Tomahawk cruise missiles tore across the Pacific at 550 miles per hour, each carrying a 1,000-pound warhead, ripping into Chinese airfields and command bunkers before alarms could even be raised. The date, April 3rd, 2025. China had fired first, convinced its sprawling anti-access kill web, hundreds of HQ-9B interceptors, squadrons of J-16 fighters, and a dense radar lattice could smash any threat near Taiwan's waters. What Beijing didn't realize was that its crosshairs were locked not on fragile drones or recon planes, but on the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, a floating nuclear citadel powered by twin A-1B reactors, generating more than 300 megawatts. Linked to thousands of interceptors, stealth jets, and phased array sensors, the Ford was engineered for precisely this showdown. Within just 72 hours, China's coastal defenses lay in smoking ruin. More than $5.7 billion worth of aircraft, missiles, and infrastructure had been gutted. PLA units were forced to retreat over 200 miles inland, stunned by the scale of their own miscalculation. So how did this clash unfold? And what chilling lesson does it send to any nation tempted to challenge American power at sea? Stay tuned. Your support drives us to dig even deeper. At 6:45 a.m. on April 3rd, 2025, Chinese early warning radars along the Fujian coast detected a massive, high-signature formation moving steadily through the Taiwan Strait, less than 80 nautical miles from their shoreline. To PLA analysts, the radar echoes looked ominous, perhaps a flotilla of advanced unmanned sensor platforms or stealth drone swarms drifting dangerously close to their declared boundary. Inside the Southern Theater Command, the response was immediate and uncompromising. Generals, convinced this was an American probe aimed at testing sovereignty, ordered a preemptive strike. Confidence ran high. China's coastal bastion bristled with HQ-9B surface-to-air missile batteries, each capable of reaching 125 miles with active radar seekers. Air bases scrambled J-16s and J-11s, armed with PL-15 long-range missiles able to carve kill zones more than 120 miles wide. Along the shores near Xiamen and Shantou, Type 730 close-in weapon systems, spitting 4,200 rounds per minute, track the corridors where any intruder might appear. By 6:52 a.m., the decision was sealed. Dozens of missiles clawed upward, their exhaust tails blazing across the dawn sky. To Beijing, it looked like sovereignty defended. In reality, those streaks of fire were racing toward one of the most powerful naval formations on Earth, a target far deadlier than anything PLA commanders imagined. But here was their fatal miscalculation. The radar signatures lighting up Chinese screens were not fragile drones or expendable reconnaissance pods. They were the beating heart of American sea power, the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, the most powerful mobile war machine on the planet. At its core loomed the carrier itself, driven by twin A-1B nuclear reactors pumping out more than 300 megawatts of raw energy, enough to electrify a small city and fuel a floating arsenal. The Ford's combat web fused SPY-6 phased array radars with Aegis baseline 10 fire control, weaving a picture of the battle space in milliseconds. Around her, escorts bristling with vertical launch cells stood ready to unleash interceptors, while electronic warfare suites primed to jam, mislead, and blind. By firing first, Beijing had not simply defended territory, it had ignited a direct confrontation with a nuclear fortress designed for this very war. And in mere moments, they would learn what it meant to underestimate a force that had spent decades preparing to fight precisely this kind of conflict. Pretty unbelievable, right? As Chinese missiles ripped through the upper atmosphere at nearly Mach 4, the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group shifted instantly into combat footing. Twin A-1B reactors poured out more than 300 megawatts, powering a fortress bristling with sensors and weapons. The SPY-6 phased array radar painted over 1,000 tracks at once, while Aegis baseline 10 fire control selected intercept points in split seconds. On the Ford's flanks, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers with 96 vertical launch cells each unleashed the first wave of interceptors. SM-6 missiles screamed outward at Mach 3.5, hunting Chinese HQ-9S in mid-course. As survivors closed, the second shield, Rim 1, 6.2 ESSMs, flared to life, accelerating to Mach 4 to smash targets in the terminal phase. And then came the knife fight range, Rim 116 rolling airframe missiles, guided by passive RF and infrared seekers, crisscrossed the sky in deadly swarms, erasing the strays that dared slip through. Layer upon layer, steel, fire, and precision fused into an unbreakable wall. But hold on. What came next would prove exactly why U.S. carrier groups remain feared across every ocean. Then came the final shield, the Phalanx CYWS. Six-barreled Gatling gun spun into a blur, spitting over 4,500 depleted uranium rounds per minute. Streams of tracers carved arcs through the air, detonating incoming warheads in blinding flashes just miles from the carrier's hull. It was the last line of defense, raw steel meeting fire in a mechanical growl that echoed across the waves. Above, the fight transformed into something far deadlier. F-35C, Lightning IIs, each loaded with nearly 18,000 pounds of precision weapons, roared off the deck in full afterburner. Their mission, carve out a kill zone far beyond the carrier's reach. Overhead, E-2D advanced Hawkeyes orbited with long-range ESA radar, orchestrating the ballet of interceptors and fighters with seamless precision. Despite the ferocity of China's strike, most of it was shredded, spoofed, or detonated harmlessly in the layered defense web. A handful of warheads burst close enough to rattle the flight deck, sending shockwaves across parked aircraft and crew. But the strike group steadied almost instantly, its shield unbroken. This was no collection of ships. It was a single organism, a lethal fusion of sensors, guns, jets, and electronic warfare. And for Beijing, the true nightmare was only beginning. Are you still following us? Because the moment China's first wave burned out, America struck back with lethal speed. High above the strait, F-35C Lightning IIs, guided by E-2D Hawkeyes and SPY-6 radar uplinks, locked onto scrambling J-16J-11s rising from Xiamen and Shantou. AIM-120D MRAMs streaked outward, 90-mile killers with active radar seekers. Within seconds, dozens of Chinese fighters, each worth over $70 million, were torn from the sky in blossoms of fire. Offshore, Type 0 5-4A frigates tried to carve kill zones with HQ-16 missiles. Their radars lit the air, but that light became a death sentence. EA-18G Growlers jammed their frequencies. Then AGM-88 HARM missiles homed in at Mach 2, shattering sensor masts in incandescent blasts. On land, FA-18 Super Hornets unleashed extended-range JDAM glide bombs from 30,000 feet. GPS and inertial guidance delivered impacts within 30 feet of target, collapsing hardened radar bunkers into smoking rubble. The tally was devastating. More than 20 modern fighters downed, at least 3 warships crippled, entire coastal defense zones silenced. Billions of dollars vanished in minutes. More damaging still, the myth of China's A2/AD fortress crumbled before the world's eyes. Beijing's gamble had not just failed, it had backfired catastrophically, inviting an American counteroffensive of a scale and precision they were wholly unprepared to face. In the next moments, you'll see exactly how the United States unleashed a response so overwhelming it reshaped an entire coastline. Barely an hour after China's first strike, the Gerald R. Ford's Combat Information Center fused terabytes of live intelligence, satellite feeds, P-8 Poseidon patrol sweeps, and targeting data relayed by forward F-35Cs into a ruthless strike matrix. Orders rippled outward. Steel hatches groaned open across escort destroyers. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, each bristling with 96 vertical launch cells, spat out wave after wave of Tomahawk Block 4 cruise missiles. Nearly 90 in under 10 minutes, each low-flying at 550 miles per hour, hugging the sea surface so tightly they vanished into radar clutter. Each carried a 1,000-pound high-explosive warhead, guided by Tercom terrain contour mapping that let them slip through gaps in Chinese air defenses like ghosts. Their contrails streaked across the horizon in eerie silence, a storm of steel blades carving toward the mainland. And the assault didn't come from above the waves alone. Beneath them, at depths beyond 500 feet, a Virginia-class nuclear attack submarine joined the symphony, unleashing its own spread of UGM-109S. Hidden in the ocean's shadows, it struck from vectors Chinese anti-submarine patrols never even glimpsed. This was not just firepower, it was precision devastation, a dual-axis onslaught designed to overwhelm, confuse, and annihilate in one merciless stroke. The storm was only beginning. The dual-axis assault overwhelmed what remained of PLA coastal tracking systems. Tomahawks didn't simply crater random runways, they hunted critical nodes with surgical precision. Command bunkers, long-range radar domes, hardened missile magazines. Each warhead was guided by terrain contour mapping and GPS updates to strike the very backbone of China's anti-access grid. In less than 25 minutes, over 15 major military installations were either gutted or left smoldering ruins. Above the coastline, the onslaught only deepened. F/A-18 Super Hornets swept in from 30,000 feet, well outside the reach of surviving SAMs, each hauling nearly 17,000 pounds of mixed ordnance. Extended-range JDOM glide bombs rained down with sub-30-foot accuracy, collapsing bunkers into rubble and turning radar dishes into molten wreckage. Alongside them, AGM-88 HARM missiles streaked at Mach 2, homing on the last flickers of Chinese radar emissions. EA-18G Growlers jammed what little communication remained, cutting frontline batteries off from command. Confusion metastasized into paralysis, and through it all, the American shield never faltered. PY-6 radars aboard the Gerald R. Ford scanned relentlessly, feeding intercept solutions to SM-6 missiles capable of intercepting threats 230 miles out at Mach 3.5. Closer in, ESSM stood ready, while the mechanical snarl of failing CIWS turrets remained locked on for last-ditch defense. The strike group maintained its integrity, a fortress at sea, untouchable amid the chaos it unleashed. By the time the waves of fire subsided, Beijing's billion-dollar A2/AD dream lay shattered. Years of investment, entire battalions of long-range missiles, and carefully layered defenses had been dismantled in under 2 hours. What China had touted as an impenetrable kill web was revealed instead as a brittle facade, incapable of withstanding America's full-spectrum strike machine. For China, the lesson would be seared into every smoking radar mast and cratered airfield along its southeastern shore. By dawn on April 5th, just 48 hours after China's rash decision to fire the first shot, the scope of devastation was undeniable. High-resolution satellite imagery, both American and neutral commercial, captured the same grim mosaic. Charred runways, collapsed radar domes, and burned-out missile batteries stretched along nearly 300 miles of China's southeastern coastline. The damage tallies were staggering. More than 40 frontline fighters, J-16s and J-11s, worth an estimated $5.7 billion, were either destroyed on the ground or blasted from the sky. At least 5 battalions of HQ-9 long-range surface-to-air missiles, once the pride of China's air defense network, lay as twisted metal carcasses, their launch tubes frozen in silence. Over 15 major military installations, including hardened ammunition depots, sprawling fuel farms, and reinforced command posts, had been reduced to rubble or rendered inoperable. The People's Liberation Army had little choice but to retreat. Surviving air defense units pulled back more than 200 miles inland, abandoning the very coastline they had sworn to fortify. With radar nets shattered and interceptor belts gutted, China effectively ceded both its coastal airspace and maritime approaches to uncontested American dominance. For civilians, the shock was equally real. Ports along Fujian and Guangdong went dark under strict blackout orders, terrified that even the faintest radar emission might trigger another U.S. strike. Fishing fleets remained tied up. Coastal cities braced for more destruction. Inside Beijing's war rooms, the mood shifted from triumphalist bluster to sobering dread. The A2/AD doctrine the Chinese strategists had paraded for over a decade, touted as the shield that would keep U.S. carriers beyond the second island chain, had collapsed in days. What began as a show of force had instead exposed critical vulnerabilities. turning billions in investment into smoldering wreckage. For China, this meant not just untold billions in replacement costs and years of rebuilding, but a strategic humiliation broadcast to the entire world. In less than 3 days, what began as a Chinese attempt to assert control over its maritime backyard by force turned into a devastating object lesson in modern naval warfare. Beijing's leaders gambled that massed missile grids, fighter squadrons, and layered radars could humble an American carrier group. Instead, they watched billions in hardware vanish, coastal defenses collapse, and their strategic aura unravel before a global audience. For the United States, there was no celebration, no triumphal boasting, only cold confirmation that decades of investment had paid off. Multi-layered carrier defenses worked as designed. Long-range precision strike systems shattered hardened bunkers and missile sites. Seamless joint targeting fused satellites, stealth jets, destroyers, and submarines into a single lethal machine. In under 72 hours, an entire anti-access strategy was dismantled with breathtaking efficiency. The lesson was brutal but unmistakable. Striking at the heart of American power is not a skirmish. It is a wager of national credibility, infrastructure, and deterrence. Any nation that dares gamble risks losing not just ships or aircraft, but the trust of its people and the illusion of its strength. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue bringing you these deep dives into the world's most critical flashpoints. Thank you for watching.